They say every building has a voice. A new house creaks and pops as it settles, like the stretching of waking bones. An old library whispers with the turn of every page, a soft, papery sigh. But the Hadley-Proctor Textile Mill, this place doesn't have a voice. It has a breath, a slow, wet, rattling breath that you feel more than you hear. A draft that isn't air. A pressure change in the dead of night that lets you know you are not, and have never been, alone. My name is Dan. I took this job because I was desperate. Isn't that always the way? The ad was simple. Night shift security, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 nights a week. Competitive pay, must be comfortable with extended solitude. The pay wasn't just competitive, it was suspiciously high. When I asked the day guy, a weathered old-timer named Frank, why, he just grunted and shoved a heavy ring of keys into my hand. Just walk the routes, kid. Clock the checkpoints. Don't fall asleep. And whatever you do, don't get curious about the noises. What noises? I'd asked, a smirk playing on my lips. I'd seen every horror movie under the sun. I wasn't some easily spooked college kid. Frank had fixed me with a stare that was all yellowed sclera and deep, tired lines. The mill is old. It makes noises. Pipe settling, wind in the rafters, rats in the walls. You hear anything else, you ignore it. You especially ignore anything that sounds like it's coming from the old dying vats in the West Wing. That part of the mill is condemned for a reason. Structural instability. You go in there, you might not come out. He'd said the last part with a strange emphasis, like structural instability was a code for something far worse. I'd brushed it off. A condemned wing in a century-old mill? Of course it was creepy. That was part of the charm. The first week was boring. Blissfully, mind-numbingly boring. I'd do my rounds, my flashlight beam cutting a lonely path through cavernous rooms filled with silent, sheet-shrouded looms that stood like sleeping giants. The air was thick with the ghosts of cotton and wool, a dusty sweetness that clung to the back of the throat. The only sounds were the hum of the few active overhead lights and the skittering of what I assured myself were, in fact, just rats. The security office was a relic, a glass-walled box overlooking the main factory floor. Inside was a bank of 16 black and white monitors, each fed by a camera strategically placed throughout the complex. The images were grainy, washed out, the resolution terrible. It was like watching a tragedy unfold through a snowstorm. Camera 7 covered the entrance to the West Wing. Its lens pointed down a long, dark corridor that the feeble lights never quite illuminated. I found my eyes drifting to it more than the others. There was just something about that particular patch of darkness. It felt deep. It started during my second week. A small thing, really. I was on my rounds, passing through the main weaving room, when I heard a distinct, wet slap. It came from the far end of the hall, the direction of the West Wing. I froze, my heart doing a clumsy tap dance against my ribs. I swung my flashlight beam, but it found nothing but more dust and shadows. Rats, I whispered to myself, the word sounding hollow and foolish in the vast silence. Rats don't sound wet. Back in the office, I pulled up the digital log for camera 7. The footage was a still image of that dark corridor. For a moment, I saw nothing. Then, at the very edge of the frame, a shadow seemed to detach itself from the greater darkness and flit past. It was fast, a blur of deeper black against the grey. It could have been a trick of the light, a glitch in the old system. I told myself that. I almost believed it. The next night, it was a sound on the audio feed. The cameras had tinny, low-quality microphones, usually just picking up the ambient hum. But at 2:17 a.m., from the speaker for camera 12, which covered the old spinning room, adjacent to the west wing. I heard it. A low, guttural whispering. It wasn't words, not any language I knew. It was a series of clicks and wet, gurgling sounds, like someone trying to speak with a mouth full of mud and broken teeth. It lasted for maybe 10 seconds, then cut off. My blood ran cold. This wasn't my imagination. This was on the recording. I saved the clip, my fingers trembling on the keyboard. I played it back, again and again, the volume low. Each time that horrid, liquid whispering felt like insects crawling up my spine. I started reviewing the footage from all the cameras every morning before I left. It became a ritual. I'd sit with a mug of cold coffee and scroll through the night, my eyes glued to the grainy screens. Most of the time, it was nothing, static, dust motes dancing in the infrared. But then I'd find something. A shadow pooling at the end of a hall on camera 4, then receding like a tide of ink. A figure, impossibly tall and thin, standing motionless in the middle of the yarn storage room on camera 9, its head tilted at an angle that looked broken. When I blinked, it was gone. On camera 7, the one watching the West Wing entrance, I saw a hand. It was pale and long-fingered, slick with something dark, sliding along the wall for just a frame or two before vanishing back into the darkness. It wasn't human. The fingers were too long, the joints too many. I was losing my mind. The lack of sleep, the constant low-grade terror, it was sanding down my nerves. I started jumping at the sound of my own footsteps. The dusty sweetness of the air began to smell faintly of rot, of something long dead and damp. I confronted Frank one morning as he was coming in. I must have looked as bad as I felt because his usual gruff expression softened into something like pity. "Frank, what the hell is in this building?" I asked, my voice cracking. He sighed, a long, weary sound. "I told you, kid, don't get curious." "It's a little late for that," I said, pulling out my phone. "Listen to this." I played the audio clip of the whispering. Frank's face went ashen. He took a step back from me, as if I were carrying a disease. You recorded it. It's on the system. What is it, Frank? Is someone squatting in there? Some kind of animal?" "It's no animal," he muttered, looking at the floor. "And it's not a person. Not anymore. Old man Hadley, the original owner, he was into things he shouldn't have been. Down in the sub-basement, below the dyeing vats, there are books down there. Symbols painted on the walls. He wasn't just making textiles. He was trying to weave something else. Something from elsewhere." "Elsewhere? What does that mean?" "It means that this building isn't just a building, Dan. It's a nest, a hive, and the things that live here, they've been here a long, long time. They're in the walls, in the pipes. They're part of the structure. The structural instability, it's them. They don't like to be watched. They don't like to be recorded. You need to stop. Delete that. Forget you ever saw it." But I couldn't. That was the problem. The terror was now intertwined with a sick, compulsive fascination. I had to know. I had to see. That night, I came in armed. Not with a weapon. What good would a gun or a baton be against something that whispered in the dark and that had too many joints? But with technology. I brought a high-resolution digital camcorder, the kind you use to film weddings. I also brought a powerful LED spotlight. If I was going to see what was on the footage, I was going to see it clearly. The night was heavier than usual. The silence felt deliberate, a held breath. I did my rounds faster, my senses screaming, the new camcorder a heavy weight in my sweaty palm. I pointed it down dark corridors, the viewfinder showing a world much clearer and more menacing than the security monitors. Every shadow seemed poised to move. Back in the office, I set up the camcorder on a tripod, pointing it directly at the bank of monitors. I wanted a clean, high-quality record of whatever the security system captured. I synced the time codes and settled in for the long, terrifying haul. The first few hours were quiet. I fought off sleep, my eyes darting between the live monitors and the viewfinder of my own camera. Then, at 1:04 a.m., camera 7 flickered. On the grainy security monitor, the darkness of the West Wing corridor seemed to swell. I leaned forward, my breath catching in my throat. On my high-def camcorder's screen, the image was even more unsettling. The grain wasn't just static, it was a shifting, swirling pattern, like maggots seething in a wound. And then something emerged. It didn't walk. It poured itself out of the darkness. It was a figure of impossible proportions, a tangle of pallid, glistening limbs. It was tall, easily 7 or 8 feet, but it moved in a crouch, its long, multi-jointed arms dragging along the floor, with a sound I couldn't hear but could feel in my teeth, a soft, abrasive scraping. Its skin wasn't skin. It was a membrane, wet and translucent, stretched tight over a framework that was all wrong. I could see darker shapes moving beneath the surface. It had no face, just a smooth, ovoid head where features should have been. But as it moved slowly, deliberately down the corridor towards the camera, I saw that the front of its head was dotted with dozens of dark, unblinking holes, like a sponge. They pulsed rhythmically. This was no ghost. This was something biological, something real and vile. It stopped directly in front of camera 7, and the screen on the security monitor dissolved into a storm of digital snow. But my camcorder kept rolling. It leaned in, its head filling the frame. A slit opened in the smooth flesh beneath the pore-covered area, a vertical gash that dripped a black syrupy fluid. And from that slit came the whispering, clearer now, horribly clear. It was a language of sucking and clicking, of gurgles and pops. It was the sound of a drowning man trying to form words. And then it stopped. The head tilted. The pores seemed to dilate, as if tasting the air through the camera lens. And then it spoke a single, clear, perfectly articulated word, in a voice that was a mockery of human speech, a wet, hollow echo from a ruined throat. Dan. My blood turned to ice. I fell back in my chair, a strangled cry escaping my lips. It knew my name. It had seen me, through the cameras, through the glass, through the walls. It knew I was watching. The thing on the screen then did something that shattered what was left of my sanity. It raised one of its long, boneless arms, and it waved. A slow, deliberate, friendly wave directly at me. Then it turned and poured itself back into the darkness of the West Wing. The security monitor flickered back to the empty corridor. The silence in the office was absolute, broken only by the frantic hammering of my heart. I was hyperventilating. Tears of pure, undiluted terror streamed down my face. I had to get out. I had to leave now. I scrambled for my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip them. I didn't care about the job, the money, my stuff. I just had to run. I lunged for the office door, yanking it open, and I stopped. The main factory floor was no longer the empty, dusty space I had left. It was now filled with a thick, roiling fog. It wasn't smoke. It was a deep, sickly yellow, like a bruise, and it moved with a purpose, coiling and uncoiling like a nest of serpents. It smelled of ozone, of old blood, and of that same damp rot I'd been noticing. And in the fog, I saw them. Shapes, dozens of them. Some were like the thing from the corridor, tall, multi-limbed, and glistening. Others were smaller, scuttling on too many legs, their forms indistinct blurs of pale flesh and sharp angles. Some clung to the ceiling, suspended by filaments of black mucus. Others dragged themselves across the floor, leaving glistening dark trails. They were all moving, not towards me, not yet. They were going about some unfathomable, grotesque business. One was unraveling a sheet from a loom, not with its hands, but with long, tongue-like appendages that emerged from its chest. Another was gathered around a drain in the floor, dipping its head-like appendage into the grate and making a sound like a dog lapping water. This was the truth. The rats in the walls, the structural instability. This was what lived here. This was the hive. I slowly, carefully retreated back into the office and locked the door. The glass walls, which had once felt like a fishbowl, now felt as flimsy as tissue paper. I was a specimen in a jar, and the things outside were the collectors. I spent the rest of the night huddled under the desk, the camcorder still dutifully recording the bank of monitors. The screens showed nothing but static now, all 16 of them, a chorus of white noise. The things outside didn't try to get in, they just existed. I could hear their wet, slithering movements, their clicks and gurgles, the occasional nightmarish whisper that seemed to come from just the other side of the glass. When the first rays of dawn finally pierced the grimy windows of the factory, the fog began to recede. The sounds faded. By the time the sun was fully up, the main floor was empty again, just dust and silent machines, as if it had all been a bad dream. I didn't wait for Frank. I grabbed the camcorder, fled the building, and drove home in a blind panic. I called the security company and quit on the spot, giving no reason. I spent the next 2 days in a near catatonic state, jumping at every sound, sleeping with the lights on. But the compulsion returned, the need to see, to understand. Yesterday, I finally plugged the camcorder into my TV. I fast-forwarded through the night, through my terrified face, through the static on the monitors. I watched until the sun came up and the static cleared. The final hour of footage, from around 5:30 a.m., shows the security monitors one by one flickering back to life. They show the empty, peaceful mill, all except for one. Camera 7, the West Wing corridor. The thing is there again. It's standing perfectly still, facing the camera. In one of its long, glistening hands, it's holding something. I had to freeze the frame and zoom in to see what it was. It was a security badge, my security badge, the one I'd left on the desk in my frantic escape. The thing stood there, motionless, holding my badge out towards the camera, like an offering or an invitation. Then, it slowly used its other hand to point a single, grotesquely long finger, not at the camera, but past it, towards the security office, towards me. It held that pose for the rest of the recording, a silent, horrifying sentinel. The footage ended. I sat in my dark apartment, the silence screaming in my ears. I thought that was the end of it. I had the evidence. I knew the truth. I was free. Then my personal phone rang, an unknown number. With a trembling hand, I answered. There was no greeting, just the sound of wet, labored breathing, and then that same hollow, gurgling voice, now tinged with a horrible electronic distortion, as if being forced through a damaged speaker. "Dan," it whispered, "you left your door unlocked." The line went dead. I am writing this now from a cheap motel room 50 miles away. The curtains are drawn, Every lock is bolted. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I keep thinking about Frank's words. They're in the walls. They're part of the structure. The mill isn't the hive. I see that now. The mill was just the nursery, the nest. They've been there for a century, growing, multiplying, weaving themselves into the world's foundations. And I looked at them. I recorded them. I gave them my name. And now they know I'm out here, beyond their walls. They're in the pipes now. I can hear them. A faint, wet scraping in the motel plumbing. The air in here is starting to smell faintly of ozone and rot. A shadow just pulled in the corner of the room. A patch of darkness that is far, far too deep. They don't just live at the mill. They live wherever the darkness is, and I brought them with me. Don't watch the footage. Don't listen for the whispers. Just pray that the noises in your own walls are only ever rats.